Well, like Dylan said, there's a lot of food on this board right here. Food is critical for deer any time of the year. But the problem with food, the later it gets into the season, is that it's shrinking. The amount of food shrinking. But it's not just that. The amount of food that's unpressured, that a mature buck especially feels safe actually going to in the afternoon, is really far and few between. All food sources have been overpressured and most are depleted. And so that sets up a really big problem. Now, does and fawns, they're pretty adept at they'll go over to that food source. It's not that great. They'll come in out after dark. They bed close by. They don't move much, their home bodies. But a mature buck, he'll go find that quality food source. And why do I talk about mature bucks in the first place? Because they're the lowest hole in the bucket. I had someone ask me, what does the lowest hole in the bucket mean? It means if your bucket's leaking, you plug the lowest hole first. That's the most important hole. You got to plug that first. And so when it comes to mature bucks, when we talk about November food sources are king. It doesn't matter if you're in public or private land, that's where you're going to find bucks. And I talk about November food. Where at? Well, in big agricultural country, it could be that an entire field is already picked of corn, but there's a little bit of debris left, a little bit of waste all over the field. However, one back corner that's not pressured and it's low and it's next to good cover, that's where the deer will be. Out of a 120 acre field, they'll be in one little corner because it's the safest corner. You'll see that all the time. Typically they're not feeding right by the highway. They're all the way back in an unpressured corner, no different than on public land. So public land, you have a giant clear cut. If one end is by a parking area, they're probably not there. But go to the back end by the swamp, where it's really hard to get to, really rough to get to. And that's those deer, they might be bedding right on that edge, swamp cover, clear cut. They have all types of herbaceous growth, hardwood regeneration, shrub tips, briars, lots of food in those locations. But if it's all the same, always go to the unpressured food source. And that leads me to food plots on private land. There's no other powerful food source that you can compete with other than a food plot on private land. And so an unpressured quality food plot that's actually attracting deer and actually still has volume during November is incredible. The problem is with all these food sources, you have to have food. You know, food defines the daily movements of every deer in the neighborhood. They have to feed 5 times in a 24-hour period. That means in their bedding areas, they have to have good browse. It can't be just open hardwoods. They have to have those woody shrub tips, briars, hardwood regeneration. Those are all food sources. Roughage, like acorns, hard to digest food, and that's why they go find a better food source at night. But bottom line is, very important during the daylight hours. That dictates their stomachs. They're feeding 5 times in a 24-hour period. But that big critical food source, that clear cut on public land, maybe it's acorns in the early season, clear cut later on public land. Maybe it's a swamp edge. Maybe it's a diversity edge, meaning you have old hardwoods, meaning young hardwoods, meaning swamp edge, meaning lowland, hill country. That all dictates there's different types of habitats growing, and so something's good at some time all months of the season. The bottom line is, that's going to dictate where the deer live, and that unpressured food source will dictate where those mature bucks live, again, all season long. So that's great. You find the best food source. Easy, right? Not so fast. The problem is most people pressure the food source, especially food plots on private land. There's no other habitat improvement that ruins a hunting land more than a food plot or helps a hunting land more than a food plot. The problem is you attract every deer in the neighborhood, then you go out and spook those deer, they're not coming back. They're not coming back till after dark. Do that for a few years, and the mature bucks in the area don't even visit the property after dark. It establishes a pattern that you don't need to be on this property, you don't want to be on this property. This is truly not only a nocturnal property, this is a property you shouldn't even have in your home range under the cover of darkness. We've seen that happen, where people spook their food sources out so much. Imagine how that happens on public land. So you have to find those food sources, and it might not even be the best food source in the neighborhood, but it's the least pressured. And that's why when you find these food sources, you have to protect them. Folks, it's time for the rut, and that means you need to check out my rut web class. It'll help you navigate the entire rut. But more importantly, QuietKat is one of our important partners, and through that partnership, they've offered to clients, people that contact us, an incredible discount and opportunity to buy a new QuietKat. Look for an email that you can contact and the contact information in the description, but I really want to pass that off to you. We don't do that very often, but I want to make sure you guys don't miss out if you're looking and in the market for a new QuietKat. You're hunting with a bow. We'll hunt the outside edge. You're hunting with a gun. Hunt further off the edge then. Always protect the core of that food source, but it's not just the stand location at the food source, it's where the deer bedding and how can you get in and out of that stand location without spooking deer. Whether it's an afternoon sit you're going in and they're already bedded, you have to go around them to get to that food source. They're on the food source after dark and you're walking out. Are you walking in the morning? Are you getting too close to that food source? Always know where they're not. That food source will establish where they're bedding during the day and of course where they're moving to in the afternoon. You have to protect it. And finally, you have to follow the deer to the food. What I mean by that, especially on public land, food sources are changing. They're changing because they're spooked, but they're changing because they're not there. They're in a clear cut, get spooked, they go further back. They go on a swamp edge where there's diversity. Acorns, white oak acorns are dropping in September, late September. Well, they're not there probably in November. Even on a good year like this, there's acorns everywhere. Red oak are a little bit more consistent, but they're a little bit later. You can't always go by oaks and acorns. They're big open hardwoods. What happens later in the season? It gets cold, deer need a thermal cover. They need high stem count to keep warm. They can't just live out in the open hardwoods when it's 10 degrees and there's a good wind. They have to get out of the wind, even if that means the shady side of a ridge. So that means that you might be on a decent food source for the area, but it's too exposed. And it's too exposed for a long distance, so the deer can't travel to it during the daylight to get to it. If they can't travel to it in that last half hour, hour after dark safely, or before dark safely, then they're probably not going to use it. So you need to move. It's great when there's snow on the ground up north here because the deer will tell you where to go. You have to be a little bit more steadfast when you don't have snow. Plan for their movements. Know that if this gets pressured out, they're probably going to eat in that food source over there. That's unpressured. But if you're following unpressured food sources, you're getting in and out of stand locations without spooking deer, always playing it safe. I'd rather watch a food source from a distance. You know, I've shot deer at 195 yards with muzzleloader, just 100 grains of pellets, 777 pellets. I don't put a lot in there, but I know where my muzzleloader's hitting. But I've shot them at 254 out here with the muzzleloader, 195 in Wisconsin. I don't mind shooting longer distance. There's always a risk for that longer distance, but I don't mind doing that if it means that I can get into a stand over and over and watch the same food source and never spook those deer. That's the name of the game. Doesn't matter if you're hunting an oak flat on public land, the edge of a giant clear cut on public land next to a swamp, or a food plot or an ag field. Getting into a stand or blind without spooking deer, being able to watch an unpressured food source is an incredible tactic during November. And let's face it, after the rut, you get into post-rut time, the latter half of November in a lot of states, deer are focusing heavily on food. And that's another reason food really matters this time of year, because after the rut, bucks need to replenish lost energy levels that they lost during the rut. They're going to be on food in the afternoon. They might be laying around the rest of the day, not moving at all. It looks like a ghost town. But if you're on an unpressured food source, it can be a hot spot to be for you. That's why a lot of our bucks we kill later in gun season, into muzzleloader season, because everyone else around, depleted food sources, pressured food sources, and that makes unpressured food sources, even if lower quality. Quality doesn't always matter as much, even if it's lower quality, but it makes them really heat up in November. Concentrate on these food sources in November, learn how to hunt them, protect them, get in and out of your stands, move with the deer if you need to, and boy, you set yourself up for some successful hunting for the rest of your life.
Cool! Go hunting, dude.
Okay, let's go. I appreciate you guys watching the YouTube channel, but I don't know if everyone knows everything that we have to offer, whether it's on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, our website, our WHS Wildlife Blends, our seed company. Also Instagram you can check out. I'm very active on Instagram, putting strategies on there, photos of what we do every day. Much more active there than Facebook. But our seed, web classes, books, clients, articles. I have over 600 articles on whitetailhabitatsolutions.com, everything whitetail strategy. Of course, we have hats on there, and then make sure to check us out on Instagram again. But lots of stuff to offer. We're always coming out with new things, and this isn't the end of it. We have more things coming soon. Make sure to check us out.